Right. So continuing on with section 3, we have point 5, which says engineers shall not be influenced in their professional duties by conflicting interests. And the sub points in this category kind of go on to say, engineers shouldn't be accepting financial or other considerations for free designs or commissions or allowances from contractors or other parties, that are dealing with work that the engineer may be responsible for. Virtue ethics, in our opinion, would probably have no issue with these requirements, as an engineer would practice being just by following their code. And it wouldn't see anything to object here. With part 6 of section 3, we have engineers shall not attempt to obtain employment or advancement or professional engagements by untruthfully criticizing other engineers or by other improper or questionable methods. And so the big thing here when we were analyzing this with the subpoints and considering it with virtue ethics was the fact that it says untruthfully criticizing other engineers and using improper questionable methods, which right away kind of set off a bell with that. That kind of aligns with virtue ethics, not doing anything that is improper. And with these sub points, we didn't see anything wrong with it. We think virtue ethics would have no issue with these requirements. It would emphasize practicing honesty, truthfulness, and being honorable. And in all of those sub points in all these cases, a character would break the code of ethics while displaying those negative virtues. So we think virtue ethics lines up pretty well here as well. For point 7 in section 3, we have engineers shall not attempt to injure maliciously or falsely, directly or indirectly, the professional reputation, prospects, practice, or employment of other engineers. Engineers who believe others are guilty of unethical or illegal practice shall present such information to the proper authority for action. And just for that point alone, in that first sentence, talking about, maliciously or trying to hold somebody back, right away, once again, that would go against somebody who's practicing virtue ethics. Just with greed and being dishonest, like we said. These sub points, we have the first one, engineers in private practice shall not review the work of another engineer for the same client without the knowledge of such engineer. So with that one, I had a little bit of disagreement with virtue ethics there, or like a way that you could see it differently with virtue ethics. It probably would agree with the overall statement, but within that sub point, there may be situations where an engineer feels that it is their duty to review it for the safety of others. And when you take that into consideration with virtue ethics, there may just be a point to pick there. But with the other two subpoints for point 7, we didn't think that virtue ethics would have an issue with it. With point 8, we have engineers shall accept personal responsibility for their professional activities, provided, however, that engineers may seek indemnification for services arising out of their practice for other than gross negligence, where the engineer's interests cannot otherwise be protected. So this is talking about when engineers are working with state registration laws in the practice of engineering, and they should not use the association with a non-engineer or a partnership as kind of a way to mask unethical acts. And once again, virtue ethics would line up with that. If an engineer is practicing virtue ethics, they're not trying to be dishonest or in any sort of way misconstrue their actions or do something improper where other people could be hurt and their actions could be taken wrongly. So with this overall point in the subpoints, we didn't think virtue ethics would have an issue and would agree with it. And for the last point in section 3.9, we have engineers shall give credit for engineering work to those whom credit is due and will recognize the propriety interests of others. Once again, virtue ethics is big on being honest. So right off the bat, being honest and giving credit where it's due, something that virtue ethics would definitely push for as well. And that's kind of what the first subpoint talks about, and why we say, virtue ethics would want you to rightfully give individuals their flowers where they're due. For subpoint 2, where it says engineers use designs supplied by a client, recognize that the design remains the property of the client and may not be duplicated by the engineer for others without express permission. While I do think virtue ethics would agree that the onus is on the engineer to gain permission, I think it would also ask that people be willing to give permission. Once again, if you go to that essay or that paper we were given, it kind of talks about how virtue ethics may not like when people try to withhold information, as it can be seen as greedy. And then with subpoints 3 and 4 here for this section, we think that virtue ethics would agree with it and would have no issue, and would also ask that engineers do the same that the Code of Ethics asks us to do.